everyone. My name is Padmini Nidumolu, and I'm the co-founder of Lean and Agile for Women, an organization that was co-founded with Leila Rao to bring women on a common platform to recognize, first of all, to identify, recognize, celebrate, and most importantly, bring women across the world together so we can co-create this movement, we can co-create this platform where we all can learn, share, and offer to each other. That's the crux of this movement. And as part of this organization, we initiated an effort called LIA100, bringing 100 women to the community, their journeys, their struggles, their challenges, and most importantly, how did they survive them? How are they thriving? And how are they giving back to the community? Those are the stories that we want to bring to the community and we believe are valuable to the community. And as part of that initiative, today we have with us from England, Portia Tung. Welcome, Portia. Very glad that you're here with us.
Hello, Padmini. Good to see you too.
So, Portia, I'll introduce you very briefly and then we will get talking and we will learn more about you. Okay. So, a little bit about Portia. She's a personal and executive coach. She's an executive agile coach and she plays researcher, creating transformative change in a range of organizations, including the Prime Minister's Office, the NHS, British Airways, and global financial institutions. Portia combines coaching and business strategies with play to bring about positive and enduring change. She's also the founder of the School of Play, dedicated to promoting happier adulthood through lifelong play. And that says a lot and already makes me curious, Portia, to kind of learn more about how you did, everything that you did. So welcome back again. Let's start with what brought you into Agile in the first place?
So in the late 90s, I started off as a software developer doing Java. And in those kind of late 90s, XP started appearing, or some form of XP. And there was quite a community already in London. And since that was where I worked, it was naturally what I was drawn to. And of course, there was Ken Beck's book as well with Cynthia. And I was really inspired by all that. So I remember, really, I guess, almost swallowing the book whole and thinking, finally, here's some talk of values, right? When it comes to creating nurturing workplaces for human beings, which I think so many organizations still forget or overlook. And I was very excited at that point. And so, yeah, I started with extreme programming as a developer.
That is fantastic. And that is such a strong foundation, right? To kind of understand the agile ways of working and delivering software. That's probably already a very solid foundation that brought you into agile ways of working.
Yeah, it's curious you say that as well, Padmini, because when I look at my journey and other people's journey, because it's just inevitable, right? They're all such different stories. I guess mine would be a more classic one. Yeah, so I didn't just jump in sideways, I guess, into agile, which is another way of getting into it. I guess I started from the grassroots in that sense, and did my time programming, which I really, really enjoyed. And one of the things I discovered was that I was better at enabling people problems to be solved rather than software problems. Although I wrote pretty decent software as well, and I learned a great deal from the developers I worked with.
Yeah, and definitely, I think that's grassroots right there, and not jumping sideways. And there are pros and cons to both. So, interested to learn more about that. So tell us, in your long journey, right from extreme programming to where you are today, Agile movement as a whole across the globe caught quite some momentum, right? There are different roles that are being defined. communities that are being developed, and organizations are catching on, right? Like fire. Everybody wants to be transformed to agile. Can you share with us what that landscape looked to you right from the late 90s until now, which is about, 2.5 decades roughly? What are
Mm.
some of the, those milestone changes you've seen? And also, if you can throw light on, are you seeing a positive trend or a negative trend in this?
Um, I guess rather than judging it, I could share my experiences and my perspective.
Yeah, sure.
I think agile is very lucrative financially, and I think there are pros and cons with that, and it therefore attracts people for different reasons, and rightly so. And I think with agile, as with any other profession, it's very easy to get a cert, talk the talk, and then not bother with the walk. And I think that's why we see so many failed transformations. But like I said, this isn't unique to the agile industry, right? I call it an industry in its own right as well. I mean, it happens in
Mhm.
coaching and yoga and all different, walks of life. And I think it's about really finding out for ourselves why we show up at work every day
Yeah.
and what is our life's purpose when we do show up. And I think that's the key thing for enabling, agile to flourish, moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you brought up a great point, right? It could be positive or negative depending on, how that particular organization is really, transforming itself, because it's not just one silver bullet, right? There are so many parameters and so many aspects of transformation, and the people who are enabling the transformation. So, I think, what you just summarized makes a lot of sense. I think what is required in the agile world right now, rather than looking at if it's positive or negative overarching. That's very interesting. And also, Portia, you have worked in some, you know, phenomenal places, right? Prime Minister's office, NHS, etc. And those are the spaces which have huge impact on the community, on the country, and the people that they serve. How did Agile in general work in those spaces?
So that's a good question, Padmini, because actually I didn't do agile there. I did coaching there, and in
Okay.
particular play coaching. So it was more about creating transformational change at a people level and from a people perspective rather than process.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
typically the way I would work is it could be one-to-one leadership coaching, and or group coaching with senior executives who are leading a particular NHS practice or a group of practices.
Okay. Okay. And were they receptive? The reason I ask is, that there is a lot of bias and prejudice when we look at, somebody in government capacity, in government service capacity. Were they receptive? How was the coaching in general?
Well, I think it depends a great deal on the coach as well as
Sure.
the
Yeah.
client. It takes tango. I think one of the things that I'm seeing, which is common both to the agile world and beyond, is that we really look at solving problems
Yeah.
at a very localized place. And so we think, okay, well, there's this issue with this process. How do we, speed up throughput of, be it patients through surgeries or, software releases per month, right? And we look at that and we go, okay, well, we just look at the process, we'll measure the value stream and the times, and then we'll go for that. But I think we really need to take a much more systemic view. So take a step back. And I mean, not just one step, but, look at a, multiple 1,000 feet view and really take in an organization as a whole and to begin working with the leaders and managers first. I think it's suboptimal very often to work with people on the ground who are delivering value, because very often they are already doing the best they can. And if we were to treat that as that place, and I don't mean the people, but that place of work in the value stream as a bottleneck, and that, let's just say, fix that as the bottleneck itself, then we can start exploring other parts of the system and what we can do with other parts of the system that can increase the throughput of value through that bottleneck, right? And that's what I mean by working with leaders and focusing with them. And in organizations where leaders and managers do not have access to both coaching and agile coaching, I think that's really a missed opportunity.
And I'm 100% aligned to that, Portia. And you brought up a great point, right? I think most of the agile transformations very unknowingly start with, the basic grassroots squads, as you said. And most of the times they are not the problem, because I think, coaching them is relatively easy. Shifting their mindsets is relatively easy, and they're already doing their best, as you said. I think it is the mindset of leadership layer and middle management, as we call the frozen middle, right? I think that's the layer you need to address, and bring about change from a mindset and their strategy and the policies as a whole. So I think that's a great point you made.
I think a great deal of responsibility also lies, because again, it takes two to tango, that it's up to the consultancies and the various companies, right, to really identify and determine, and if you like, measure the value they provide. Because when we bulk sell, because customers will bulk buy training after training for people on the ground, when the issues are systemic, then that's really wasteful. So I, for myself, I don't do that kind of work anymore, because I know it's an unfair and imbalance of exchange when we receive and take money knowing that nothing will be different in that system during our time there.
Yeah.
So I think the next generation and moving forward for Agile, it's really about each of us asking ourselves, has there been a balance of exchange in terms of the value we deliver as individuals or as groups and teams of coaches or whoever, right? Because the organizations could very well be spending that money doing something else if we are not affecting positive change during our time there.
Absolutely.
I take this very seriously, Padmini, because I think, it's so easy just to, talk the talk. And it's better that we drink our own champagne at the end, isn't it?
Yeah. And I can say, with a lot of confidence, we need more people like you. We need more leaders and change agents like you, right? Who are really true to what they're, brought into the organizations for, and be quick to kind of look around and say, am I really changing this systemically or just at the peripheral, layer, right? Which is a lot of times not much value. And I commend you for not taking up the job, knowing that it might actually give you, income in turn, but truly believing in what you can change or cannot change in the organization. So, commendable.
Well, it's about shared risk. I think that's the point, isn't it? Agile has such a focus on delivering value, and then to appear and then have no value delivered. I think that's bad for both the client, as well as the consultants and coaches. Now, for the listeners out there who are interested in how to go about doing this, it really begins with the first contact. So one of the things I encourage my clients to do when they invite me to come work in their organization is actually to write me a user story. And it's not for me, it's for them, right? It's for the engagement, to clearly set out their goal or goals with clear acceptance or success criteria, depending on what you like to call it. And, I'm prepared to sit down and spend time with them to really co-create that, to make sure it's crystal clear that we all know what we're aiming for. Because most organizations, I think you'll find, who have some form of agile going on, they would struggle to write that user story.
Yeah.
And that tells us something, doesn't it?
It does.
You wouldn't get married. You wouldn't get married just because you like the look of a boy or a girl. that you met at the cinema bar, right? You're going to find out a little bit more about them, look at their intentions in order for things to flourish, you know, and that's how families happen.
Yeah, yeah. And you nailed it. I think if the organization is not able to define their objective for transformation clearly, I think that's not a good starting point to begin with. So, many of us use coaching contracts and, as you said, a user story, whatever it is, for them to really define their goals and objectives, and also iteratively, right? I think, them
Oh,
kind of
absolutely.
mentioning that big bang might not help. So what do you need when? And how can we retrospect and then move on is very important. And I love the idea of user story, by the way. So thanks for sharing that.
And I think the tricks to writing and clarifying those so-called requirements and goals and purpose is to do that with the most senior person involved in such an engagement. And
Yeah.
the fact that you can't find time with them in their calendar is telling that the efforts are doomed to fail anyway.
Yes.
So perhaps it would be healthier for
Yeah.
the coaches and consultants engaged, because we look at the burnout rate in terms of agile coaches and consultants. It would be healthier for everybody to start as we intend to go on.
Yeah, yeah. And those leaders are few and far in between, right? Who can really spare that, mind space and time and, invest in it. And if you have such a leader, I think those transformations are bound to be successful. So,
well, they have a better chance.
A better chance. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
And
know
so
that
it
they're
starts
bound
with intent. Right. Right. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. And take us a little bit through why and how you started the School of Play. What is it and why?
So Padmini, it really started, this sounds like I'm so anti-agile, and it's not that. It was more about my personal pursuit of how can I provide more value in my lifetime, right? To maybe nudge the world closer towards world peace. And I'm very serious about that. And so I started looking at more deeply, how does change happen? And it doesn't happen in massive groups. It happens one person at a time. So, I trained as a professional coach as part of that journey. And I started the school because I really wanted to look for something else that can connect people and enable growth without the judgment and the entry criteria and all of this paraphernalia, right, that comes with Agile, and just a different way of thinking and being. So working with a person as a human being systemically. And so I looked back at everything I'd done in Agile, and I looked at what worked and what didn't work and what could have been better. And I noticed some key characteristics of effective change agents. And I call them the 5 R's, right? So the change agents I met in all walks of life and all types of organizations and industries typically have these 5 characteristics. So the first one is that they're highly resourceful. They can manage to get anything done, even with very little, if no budget, right? They almost operate a bit like a volunteer basis. They just get stuff done. So they're highly resourceful, like, impossible is nothing kind of thing. They're resourceful. Then they are also respectful. They don't just trample an organization to tell them, oh, you're all rubbish and you're okay now that I've arrived, I'll sort you all out. It's not at all like that. They're really respectful of the culture that is there. They're respectful of the people who've been there, especially in terms of the tenure, because for employees and workers who've been in an organization for a long time, they've given so much of their lives and their skills to that organization. I notice very often, again, when Agilists come into these organizations, there is perhaps a vilification of, oh, that group of people won't change because they've been in the organization for so long. Whereas I like to think of it was, well, hang on a minute, they were there first. They're like the ancestors of the most recent joiners. And shouldn't we respect that? Because they hold so much knowledge and experience that we, as the newbies, can learn from, and therefore not make the same mistakes, and therefore move forward much more effectively and efficiently, and bring everyone along the journey, because people shouldn't be excluded. in transformation. They should absolutely be given choice if they wish not to take part, right? It's always a, you know, a buy-in, right? A partnership. But to actively exclude people in that way, I really disagree with. So we've got people who are resourceful, they are respectful, and then they're highly responsible. So you never really have to manage them. I always say that it's probably an HR issue if you find you need to really manage people, because maybe you need to improve your HR process of how you're getting people through the door in the first place, right? And I remember when I was working in one of the banks, I was the only permanent agile coach that was paid to do that job. And it was in a, you know, a Swiss bank, and it was for the investment bank. And I knew that whenever there were financial difficulties globally, that, you know, agile coaches are the first to, you know, get let go. So I didn't want to kind of entice my fellow colleagues into becoming agile coaches in order to grow my empire so that it would look good on paper. And instead I grew a voluntary based community. And what I would do is commit to them that if they were happy to come join me on the agile training courses that we ran 100% internally, because we created it ourselves, we ran it ourselves. If they were to accompany me on that, then they could learn the agile training themselves. And then eventually they would train that course to their local communities around the world. And if getting promoted was the thing they really wanted, then I would support their promotion application and all of that. So it was just such a lovely way of seeing, you know, human nature flourish when we enable people to just be themselves rather than have this need of stick and carrot, which, although most of us agree is old school, is still the way we manage and lead.
Yeah.
So we've had resourceful, respectful, and responsible. Now, the fourth one is resilient. So they never give up either. You know, they'll go off and they'll do something because they've got a great idea. And then they'll come back and tell me, oh, Portia, that hasn't worked. But you know what? I've booked us a training room for 2 months' time, so that this time they've got more notice. And maybe, you know, we can contact more of the managers and encourage them to send people into the course, for example. So they're really, really resilient and robust in their attitude as well. And then the last one, Padmini, is really, for me, the one closest to my own heart, because I noticed that these change agents who really were doing it for greater good, you know, and also for the benefit of learning, and they get paid to do it anyway, right? It's the whole kind of downping thing of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? These folks who are authentic change agents because they're motivated for doing good for the system, the whole of the organization, they would be real, you know, just like the Velveteen Rabbit. Do you remember that story from your childhood? You know, the idea of the stuffed toy rabbit that longed to be loved by a little boy, and he figured out, logical rabbit reasoning, that if he was loved by this little boy, then he would become real one day, right? And of course, the little boy gets chicken pox or some such disease. And the rabbit then gets bundled up with the rest of the little boy's clothes and thrown out. Don't know if you remember that. And yeah, the rabbit's left in the dust heap thinking, oh, this is bad for everybody now. You know, there's no hope of becoming a real rabbit. And as usual, the fairy rocks up, normally at the last responsible moment. They never show up earlier, do they, these fairies? But anyway, then the fairy offers the rabbit the chance to become a real rabbit. And you know, what is the price of becoming that real rabbit? You know, and it's mortality, of course. You know, that's the price of being real. And I think unless we take shared risks, you know, in enabling this transformation, I don't really think we are transforming anything, certainly not ourselves, and certainly not the people we serve. So I was really excited when I spotted these kind of 5 characteristics of change agents, because it enabled me then to kind of look for those people, because I figured out, well, if we got a small group of people like that, then instead of, you know, looking behind our backs and worrying about infighting amongst the agile coaches, we could just trust each other from the off, right? And know that actually we're motivated here to do something good rather than increase our day rate and increase how long we're here for. Because for me, the way I look at it is I want to get into an organization if indeed they're happy to work with me on the user story, clarify the goals and all that. But I also want to leave as soon as possible, you know, very much like Mary Poppins, because I don't want to become part of the culture. I think the culture should be self-sustaining. And for me, that is ultimately, you know, the key success criteria. And I think if we all worked in this way, it would also force us, you know, a bit like Seth Godin's Purple Cow, it forces us to get better at what we do and to do something different every so often and to transform ourselves. And that way we remind ourselves how hard it is to transform, right? Rather than just roll up with the same decks and do the same thing every time and wonder why nothing's different.
Yeah. Oh my. I feel like I just heard a TED talk, and I'm not kidding, right? This is so inspiring, so authentic, so real in terms of the 5 R's you shared. And I love the why of it more than the what, right? You know, the why you did it. I think you wanted to discover yourself, transform yourself by identifying these traits in others and also forming that coalition, right? That cohort who can really work with you side by side, as you said, and not creating competition, but collaboration. That is so incredibly powerful, Portia. Thank you so much for sharing that in detail because those traits, even if you identify one or two or three of them in others, I think that still forms that connection, the bridge that you can really celebrate and connect with that person through that trait. So that's just incredibly powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm gonna personally go and make a note of them and potentially use that 5 R's.
Yeah, it's a good way just to start the conversation going, but it's very much about self-assessment. It's not about holding up the checklist and then having all your friends lined up and, but getting each other to reflect, what have I done today that has been resourceful? And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised because, you probably have, meet all of the 5 characteristics and most leaders or people who are doing something for the community are similar in that way.
Yeah.
And it's just so much more an optimistic way of looking at change and personal transformation rather than have you got this cert, have you got that cert, and oh no, because you follow this system of doing agile, you're going to be excluded.
Frameworks.
And we only like this. Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Framework.
Totally.
I have no issue with frameworks, but it's just it sets up this them and us rather than aren't we just all us trying to make the world a better place through what it is we do when we show up at work every day?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally aligned there. And as I said, I'm incredibly inspired, and I'm sure our viewers will be as well, because this is something which is very tangible takeaway and something that we can experiment in our own transformations. And I really liked what you said towards the end of that, which is when you leave the organization with the impact you've made, with the impact that the group of coaches have made, and you move on to the other organizations, I think that not only gives you the perspective of a new organization and a new set of challenges, because that's how you grow with, the knowledge of what it takes to transform them, but it also transforms you as a coach because you're reinventing your own ability of enabling that organization. And each time it's incrementally more, incrementally richer. I really like that metaphor you drew, that you're transforming an organization, but you're transforming yourself as well. I haven't thought about it from that lens at all. So that's something new that I've learned in this conversation. Yeah, this is fantastic, Portia. Thank you so much for sharing your background and what you're doing and how you do things. As we wrap up this interview, is there a message that you would like to give to our audience? It could be just a word, a phrase, sentence, something that you strongly believe in and live by, something that drives you forward.
This is a message for everyone, but in particular, it's really for women working in Agile. which is to bring your whole self to work and not to be intimidated by existing systems that don't support your life aspirations, such as having a family. So if your employer or your organization believes that if you work part-time, it makes you stupider, then you may want to shop elsewhere for opportunities that will support your growth. Because the fact is, and the reality is, as COVID has shown us, we all exist in the same system and we have microsystems all nested in, right? So when children come running in, you know, in their pants or whatever it is, right? You know, half clothed because they've run out of clothes, or they're not sure where they are, or they just want to sing you a song because they love you, mummy. I think it's just recognizing that that has always existed, and that organizations haven't acknowledged that for people who are primary carers. So it might be fathers who are primary carers, it might be mothers, and it doesn't matter. But to create workplaces that are just truly more humane, because if we don't really achieve that with Agile, then I really wonder what value we've added, right? It's the humanity of the work that we do that makes a difference.
Yeah, wow. That is just so profound. So profound. I think, and I love your call to action. If that's not aligning, shop elsewhere. Because as you originally said, at the beginning of this conversation, that it has to align with your values. It has to align with your vision for yourself as well, in addition to the organization. That is.
So I guess in a nutshell, you can only deliver value and be of service to others when you value yourself. That's not a thing to do.
That should be in quotes. Yeah, and that is so true. And each of us know that, but I think we need to remind ourselves that. Yeah, that is fantastic. Thank you so much, Portia. I think this was, I would say, power-packed conversation in my mind. And I'm going to replay it and watch it myself, because I think every word you said is just so incredibly valuable. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to our audience and really sharing, your journey and your challenges and your successes. Thank you so much.
And thank you for pursuing your own dream and realizing this series, Padmini. It's going to make a big difference to the community. So thank you.
Thank you.